thought I'd take some time here at the end of 2023 to look through some of the comments that I've gotten on some of the videos I've done, because some of the comments are really interesting and really astute. Here's a video I did on stereo imaging and soundstage quite a while ago. It's a PowerPoint presentation, and the first comment is that when it comes to rear soundstage, now rear soundstage is when you hear imaging coming from the rear of the room, which is rare in audio recordings. You'll hear it more in the codec demos for Dolby Atmos and things like that. But you'll also hear it in some audio recordings. Roger Waters' Amused to Death, for example, has some speaking that comes from the rear. Anyway, Timber Dynamics here writes, when it comes to rear soundstage, the room is the primary driver producing the effect. It's the reverberation off the side and back walls that give you that effect. Well, Mad Scientist comes in and says, more accurately, it's the subtle difference in phase that allow it to be recorded somewhat and only on two channels. The colloquial ear has evolved to be able to somewhat determine front to back based upon very subtle differences. I think Mad Scientist is a little more accurate here. I looked at a paper a while ago that demonstrated that you can get full 3D imaging with only two channels. Now, I know this is not going to sound great for the surround sound guys that want to do 7.2 and 9.4, and I don't know how many different variations they have. If you've looked at the most recent Atmos specification, it's absolutely crazy when you can get that effect from simple stereo. Now, albeit if you're sitting in the sweet spot, you got to sit in the sweet spot. He goes on to say, for the same reason things are hard to locate in certain situations in the real world, I've never seen the point of things like 357 audio channels. Well, we just talked about that. When it's used, it sounds fake with the exception of the front center. And that makes sense because the center image is the one that's most predominant in pretty much all recordings, movies, audio, etc. The point of all this is that you hear imaging from a two-channel setup, and the reason you hear imaging is because your brain has the ability to reconstruct what makes sense based upon what the sensory perceptions of the audio is. If you hear a saxophone in the center of the image, your brain says that's a saxophone in the center of the image. It correlates that to past experiences with saxophones in the image. So you'll hear what your brain expects you to hear, and that's why 3D imaging actually works, because when you hear something behind you, you know it. It's a primal instinct. You know something's from behind you. You hear it. He goes on to say that, yes, the brain is extremely clever, and we do use visual to run sanity checks in real time on what we hear. Of course, with pure music as in the stereo recording, there is no visual component, and we fill in the gaps with imagination based upon what we've seen as experienced. That's exactly what we just talked about here. So this is a great comment. Great comment. Here, Timber Dynamics says, one of the best albums I've heard for phase shift mixing in a total surround experience is the album Point by Yellow. So there's lots of examples out here of imaging in 3 dimensions. You just got to go find them. If you want to experience them, you just got to go find them. Let's take a look at a different video here. This one I did on hearing loss test for older audiophiles. And this was a rudimentary video. This was not meant to be seriously. This was meant for you to question your own hearing and go off and observe some of your own things here with your own hearing. So Captain Proton writes, serious observation here, composer, producer, engineer. Listening to those test tones in your room coming from your microphone shows how your room is not really balanced in any way. Yeah, exactly. I didn't, this is a very short video, and it's just the point here is to get you to think about some of this stuff. When you're an older audiophile or an older listener, your ears don't work like they used to work anymore, and it's good to know how well they work. Now, whether you want to use my little test as the definitive factor, or you want to go get your hearing tested, that's up to you. But the point is that we don't hear things as older audiophiles that we used to hear before. Here's a video I did recently on biamping stereo speakers. I put up a pair of Klipsch bookshelves and noted that you have the ability to biamp these things, and I questioned whether that was useful or a marketing gimmick. And here a commenter writes, if the impedance of the cables is insignificant across the audio spectrum compared to that of the speakers, then biamping with respect to the speakers is rather a waste. Using simulation, you can create the conditions where the difference would be measurable, at least by instruments, but in the real world, you would need large lengths of poor fed wire into the speakers with high sensitivity. Yeah, and that was my point. Now, I'm not against biamping. Pro Audio biamps all the time. You biamp subwoofers and mains. That makes perfect sense. That's just the way it is. My question was, does it make sense to biamp a tweeter in a Klipsch bookshelf? Probably not. Probably not. So anyway, this particular reader agreed with me here. Here's another video called Why YouTube for Audiophiles, one of my favorite topics, but one of the most controversial ones. I gotta admit. This guy says here, not everything is on YouTube, bud. Get over yourself. Yeah, well, I made the claim that almost everything is on YouTube. And the reality is almost everything's on YouTube. It is. I mean, you go look for an album, it's out there. Go look for a concert, it's out there. There's a lot of stuff on YouTube. I mean, I saw Black Sabbath play in the early 70s to a high school auditorium. There's material out there that you can't get anywhere else. And sometimes the audio quality is pretty darn good. It is. It's not always the best. Here, someone else wrote, let's see, YouTube music does stream at 44K hertz if you have the subscription. Yeah, you got to have the subscription. You want to have YouTube Premium, otherwise you got to deal with commercials. You gotta pay for it, just like you're gonna pay for any other streaming service. You want to pay for it. But boy, the wealth of material out there is just phenomenal. Anyway, there's a few of the comments that I thought kind of stood out. I really appreciate the comments you give me on my videos. I try to answer every one of them. So feel free to ask any questions or make any comments, and I don't mind the bad ones. I want to hear stuff that I don't know about or that I'm getting wrong. I definitely want to hear that. So thank you for all your comments, and thank you for subscribing and hitting like and all that sort of stuff. So Happy New Year, everybody.